In my last video, I gave quick little introductions to 5 subgenres that the average person might not know super well. I'm just trying to share some music that I love and help push people in the right directions for styles and sounds that aren't the most popular or easily accessible, whatever. Everybody seemed to like it, and most importantly, the comment section was very wholesome with people sharing their own perspectives and recommendations for how to get into the subgenres that I talked about. We're gonna do the same sort of thing today with 5 new categories, and remember people, I'm not trying to give some ultra-specific expert advice. I just want this to be a casual introduction for those people that want to try something new. Let's do it. Gothic rock, or goth rock, is exactly what it sounds like. Music based in rock and roll that is heavily influenced by and trying to emulate gothic styles. We're talking about a sound that emerged from the post-punk scene in the UK around the 1970s and 80s. Everything revolves around creating an eerie, dark, mysterious aesthetic, with gothic literature and its themes being the sort of base. Musically, we've got high-pitched melodic bass lines, moody rhythm guitars, synths, maybe some drum machines, and often a lead vocalist that has a deep, droning voice that might remind you of somebody like Leonard Cohen. Also, very importantly, don't forget to throw on some reverb and echo effects. Lyrically and thematically, we're touching on all the fun parts of life. Nihilism, romanticism, tragedy, loneliness, death, sadness, you get the gist. If you have a certain taste for drama and theatrics, you'll fit right in. Some musicians that helped create the earliest forms of the subgenre would be people like David Bowie and the Velvet Underground. Probably the most authentic, definitive bands of goth rock would be Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees, but the band I'm going to recommend is The Cure, and we're talking about their 1989 album, Disintegration. The reason why I'm suggesting this album is that it is one of the must-listen projects of goth rock, but it's also very accessible. It's right up there with the best works from Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees when it comes to the aesthetics of the subgenre, but it can also blend in seamlessly with some of The Cure's more pop-oriented albums. Disintegration is dark and gloomy, but full of emotion. I made a similar point in the last video when I was talking about math rock, where I think that some bands focus too much on how to be a band in the genre. They're not just being a band that happens to fall into the genre. I think that's where your music can lose its punch and passion. Instead of taking me to another world, this project really manipulates my surroundings. I've always been a huge supporter of the idea that hyper-emotional, melancholic music can make you so sad that you almost learn to have fun in that space, and you come out better and more balanced on the other side. There are so many bits and pieces within this album that remind me why I love music so much. The introduction of the bass on Homesick, the atmosphere created on the intro of Last Dance, the chilling synths on Prayers for Rain, but the song I'm gonna single out is Pictures of You, which makes me nostalgic for memories that never even happened. Neo-soul is a style that combines the soul music of the 70s with modern influences ranging from hip-hop, jazz fusion, electronic, rock, and more. If you're looking for differences between neo-soul and contemporary R&B, neo-soul tends to have more of a raw sound, things can be a little bit more abstract, and there's a heavy influence on conscious lyrics. Contemporary R&B is typically more sleek and clean, the production is more commercially friendly, and it adheres to more of a formula in general. Early pioneers of the genre would be people like Prince. I think it's interesting to look at the impact that hip-hop groups like The Roots and A Tribe Called Quest might have had. For modern neo-soul, we're talking about Thundercat, Solange, Anderson .Paak. But listen, the common opinion is that the definitive golden age of neo-soul was in the late 90s, early 2000s, with the following 4 names: D'Angelo, Miss Lauryn Hill, Maxwell, and the musician I'm going to talk about here, Erykah Badu, and I'm recommending her album Mama's Gun. On this album, we have the aforementioned fusion of styles like soul, funk, and jazz. We've got conscious lyrics that are extremely personal and autobiographical, and in short, I think if you want a perfect example of what this genre can bring, look no further. I think too many people try to put neo-soul in a box, and that's the last thing you should ever do. People assume it's just R&B with a less traditional label on it, and that's not the case. There's a massive range of sounds on Mama's Gun, and I'll do a quick little play-by-play for you. The album opens with the extremely funky Penitentiary Philosophy, which has these hypnotic effects on Erykah's voice. Didn't You Know is a catchy, charming R&B track. My Life is a defiant, bare-bones song led by this inspiring piano. Cleva is a groovy jazz pop song. Bag Lady slowly brings in one instrument after another until we have a full, soulful hip-hop band. Green Eyes is this 10-minute epic that feels like a full album's worth of twists and turns in itself, and I could go on. But the song I'm gonna recommend is Time's A-Wastin'. It's certainly not the most memorable cut on Mama's Gun. That would probably be Green Eyes or Didn't You Know, but there's something I love about Erykah's soothing storytelling on this track. The genre of singer-songwriter is gonna be a tricky one to explain at first. Aren't like most singers technically singer-songwriters? Sure, but just because a singer is also a songwriter does not mean that they make music that fits within this genre. This sound, or movement, if that's what you want to call it, is essentially reliant on storytelling. The influences are typically that of folk music, and what you should be picturing is just a guy and his guitar, singing these ultra-personal confessional songs, or protesting the government, or some other political statement, yada yada yada. One of the earliest archetypes of this style was Bob Dylan in the 60s, then people like James Taylor and Joni Mitchell in the 70s, Tracy Chapman in the 80s, Elliott Smith and Jeff Buckley in the 90s, Sufjan Stevens and Joanna Newsom in the 2000s, Father John Misty and Phoebe Bridgers in the 2010s, and so on. Singer-songwriter music has pretty much always existed and always will. Nearly all the emphasis is on the story being told within the track and the performance by the singer. It doesn't have to be completely acoustic, but it's often pretty close to it. The album I'm gonna go for here is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. If I had one word to describe this thing, I think I'd go for sentimental. There have been few albums that I've ever listened to that really make me reflect like this one does. I know this might seem like a dumb thing to say, but within this genre, these artists really mean what they say. Every word strikes you as true and authentic to what they believe in. It's less like you're listening to music and more like you're talking with a close friend. On a first listen, especially if you don't know Neil Young, you might say to yourself, oh, that's what his voice sounds like? I get it, it's a little nasally, perhaps whiny would even come to mind, but that'll go away in no time. Remember, this isn't some musician, this is your very likable, wise friend Neil that is sharing his thoughts and feelings with you. As a whole, After the Gold Rush is a collection of heartbreaking yet cozy introspective lyrics from one of the greatest to ever do it. The intro track Tell Me Why has "Tell me why is it hard to make arrangements with yourself when you're old enough to repay but young enough to sell. Only Love Can Break Your Heart" has "I have a friend I've never seen. He hides his head inside a dream. Someone should call him and see if he can come out. Try to lose the down that he's found." The song I'm gonna single out is the titular After the Gold Rush, which I think emphasizes Neil's emotional delivery and his vivid storytelling.
Thinking about what a friend had said.
Funk is music that came out of the 60s and 70s, combining soul, jazz, and primarily old school rhythm and blues. The main focus here is on creating an enticing groove, and you'll get that from some of the best bassists and drummers you will ever hear. Catchy melodies often get thrown out the window in favor of stuff that will make you get up and move for the duration of the track. There's probably more to talk about here musically than just about every genre and subgenre that we've discussed in these two videos. We've got slower tempos than stuff that you would normally categorize as dance music like pop and maybe disco, but funk has more complex rhythms than those two genres. When performing live, there can be a lot of improvisation. Drummers specifically can have sort of a free role, changing tempo and navigating the groove in whatever way they see fit, whereas you might look at the bassist as creating the groove with these prominent recurring hooks. Vocalists are often defined by their high energy, there are lots of horn sections, we usually see some sort of keys, whether it be piano or synthesizers, depending on what kind of funk you're listening to, and speaking of that, there are tons of different kinds of funk. Jazz funk, funk rock, go-go, Afrobeat, G-funk, Latin funk, and the list goes on. The must-know innovators of the genre would be musicians like James Brown, Parliament, Herbie Hancock, and more, but I'm gonna recommend something that everybody should listen to as soon as possible, whether you've never heard it or you've heard it 100 times before. Prince's 1999. Specifically, this is synth funk. It's not the most definitive, authentic example for the genre, but like with many of my picks for these videos, I'd rather have you check out something that I'm positive that you'll love. It'll give you a taste of what the genre is all about, and you can go listen to Maggot Brain and Mothership Connection when you're ready. I'm gonna keep this very short because Prince is one of those people that is just too good at everything, and I feel stupid trying to come up with the words to describe his music. This album is vibrant, ambitious, playful, and it really does make me so happy. 1999 going into Little Red Corvette is all-time great, incomparable levels of genius, and listening to this thing from front to back is genuinely exciting. On 1999, you're witnessing one of the most creative human beings to ever live do what they do best. If that doesn't make you want to throw it on right now, just listen to a snippet from the title track. Last but not least, we're going to talk about chamber folk, which in specific situations can also be called Baroque folk. This is a subgenre based around elegant production, heavily featuring acoustic guitars, harps, or even orchestras, and in turn, we get these very whimsical pictures painted for us. For me at least, chamber folk yields imagery of a simpler time and place. Not necessarily some kind of Barry Lyndon-esque aesthetics, although I do get that from time to time, but there is something fantastical about most of it. What I mean is this. Within just about any album in this subgenre, you're gonna get music that seems too beautiful to make you think of your own surroundings. I think a big part of that is due to what instruments are being played and sometimes how they're being played. How often in the wide world of music do you hear someone playing a harp, or even a woodwind instrument for that matter? And then you can find acoustic guitars in different kinds of music, but they're not plucked in this specific way. It sounds graceful, like some kind of peaceful, old-timey music. Some of the main artists in this space are musicians like Nico, Fleet Foxes, and what I'm gonna recommend for you is Joanna Newsom and her album East. This album, from 2006, is this dense, quirky, lush collection of fairy tales. This will probably be the most challenging listen of the projects that I selected, but it can also be the most rewarding once you really sink your teeth in. Joanna's vocal delivery is pretty jazzy, and the instrumentals follow the idiosyncratic blend of stuff that I described earlier. Acoustic guitars and harps, woodwinds, and an ensemble orchestra. There are 5 tracks on this, all of them very long and drawn out, and the whole thing makes you feel like you're going on an epic journey in medieval times. Sort of like how I described art pop in the last video, with something as ambitious and bizarre as this, you really have to buy into the world of the album, and I think Joanna does a fine job of getting you there. Like, seriously, this is how the album starts. I don't even know what half of these words are referring to, but in the moment, I'm there, I feel it. I've got my medieval garb on, and I'm ready to go. And Emily is indeed the song I'll be suggesting. By the end of the track, we get this really warm, whimsical finish, and it's lovely.
Loving him, we move within his borders.
Again, if I get just a few people to try something new by putting out this video, I've done my job. Leave your suggestions for these genres and others in the comments down below, and thanks for watching. Hey, thank you for watching that video. Be sure to check out all the musicians, the albums, the songs that I mentioned. If you want to support the channel, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media at RenshawHS. You can buy my merch, support my Patreon, and thank you again. I'll see you soon.